Dom, as you don't mind me calling,
Of course,
Dr. John Dominic Crossan. I want everybody to know who you are, your wonderful book, Render Unto Caesar. We're going to dive into this enigma we call the Mark of the Beast. And it's really not an enigma, but so many people, especially Christians, are very superstitious of this number, 666. And of course, the Mark of the Beast, and they have so many wild reinterpretations their imagination can create. I figure, let's get to the bottom of this. Yeah. What is really going on? Who is this man? What is this number? And how do we know? What is this you cannot buy or sell with marks on their right hand or forehead? What's going on with the globalization you're talking about in the book of Revelation? So wherever you want to begin.
Okay. Twice in the book of Revelation, the author kind of addresses directly to the readership and says, you really have to be smart here. This requires wisdom. Now, you might think the whole book requires wisdom. What are all of these images? But twice he really focuses you and said, now, pay attention here. And in both cases, they refer to Nero. Nero is, you might say, the embodiment of the beast. Let me back up. In the book of Daniel, there are beasts that come from the sea. The sea in Hebrew folklore is not a nice place. They never became sailors like the Phoenicians. The sea was where there be monsters there, as it were. So out of the sea comes beasts. The Babylonian Empire, the Median Empire, the Persian. They're beasts from the sea. And in the book of Revelation, they're all a conglomerate super beast, which is without doubt Rome itself. That's pretty obvious. The beast is on 7 hills and that's Rome, 7 mountains. But then it specifies Nero. Why all this function on Nero? People say, well, Nero, of course, persecuted Christians. We know that in the Great Fire of what was it, 64. So maybe that's what we're talking about Nero. But then we keep describing Nero as the one who was and is coming back. What's that all about? Why is Nero, isn't that supposed to be Christ as the one who is coming? Why is Nero coming? So there's an enigma, not about who the beast is, but why should it be Nero? Why Nero? As far as we can tell, and most scholars would agree, this was written in the time of Domitian in the 90s of the 1st century. Nero is gone for 30 years. Here's the reason. John's problem is this. We're in the middle of the Pax Romana. Probably nobody is still alive who ever remembers the Roman legions battering down the doors, the gates of your city and coming in with rape and slaughter. That's all past. Now we're in the Pax Romana. The 7 cities that are mentioned are the ones on what we call Western Turkey today, the Ionian cities, rich, powerful cities. They've never seen anything like this. So he has a problem. He wants to tell you that Christ is coming back to destroy the Roman Empire soon. The thesis of the book of Revelation is, put this in neon, the Roman Empire has slaughtered Christians in the immediate past, and Christ, with the power of God and the angels, is coming back to slaughter Romans in the imminent future. Doesn't that sound fair, he would say. They slaughtered Christians, Christ will slaughter them.
Can you, real quick on the slaughtering Christians part, you spend a moment in your book, I asked this of Candida Moss recently, or Candida Moss.
Yeah.
When she was talking about the Neronian persecution we find in Tacitus and Suetonius, she's highly skeptical that there was any such thing. And a lot of academics I know, they disagree with that. They say, no, I really think there was something that happened here. They were Jewish Christians, probably. They probably weren't running around after Gentiles, but probably Jewish Christians. But at the end of the day, I brought up Revelation and said, well, who the heck is being persecuted here? It looks like Revelation, he's crying about something, but you even say we should take that with a grain of salt. Can you tell us briefly as we're getting into the bigger picture?
Let me be very careful about the word I use, slaughtered. This book is awash in blood. Just get out a concordance, look up the word blood. It floods the world. I didn't say kill Christians. I didn't even say persecuted Christians. I said slaughtered. In fact, you get the feeling from John that the only dead Christians, I'm using Christians in general, there could be Jewish Christians or Gentile, but probably Jewish Christians. But anyway, I'll use Christians, just keep it simple. That heaven is filled with martyred Christians. It's hard to see, are there any up there who ain't killed? There's that scene where they're told to be patient until the full number is ready of your brothers who have to be slaughtered, brothers and sisters. So, slaughtered. Whether there was a persecution, it's probably correct that Nero, to exculpate himself, because people suspected he may have caused the fire at Rome, he probably didn't, by the way, but to exculpate himself, he blamed the Christians. I don't even know if you call that a persecution. It's like killing somebody. It's like a conspiracy almost. And of course, Tacitus, Suetonius, other authors were disgusted with this. They knew Christians had nothing to do with it, whoever they were. So I'm talking about a very specific thing. Why associate Nero with slaughter of Christians? Now, the general consensus was this. John of Patmos writes his book under Domitian in the 90s of the first century. I think that is absolutely correct, by the way. He says Romans have been slaughtering Christians. Therefore, the consensus used to say, Domitian must have persecuted Christians. Otherwise, why would John say so? And that held pretty good until modern times, when now the consensus, I think, has swung the opposite, and I think it's right. It was written under Domitian, that's not the point. But negatively, there is no evidence that Domitian, who was assassinated by the aristocracy, who didn't like him, ever persecuted Christians. Now we're talking about imperial policy and program. We're not talking about nasty little street pogroms. If your neighborhood is having a festival for the god Dionysus and the Jews or the Christians won't come out to play, why don't we burn down a few houses? Nasty stuff, of course. But that's nasty, but it's not imperial policy. So we don't have the evidence for it. And in fact, we have strong evidence against it. Because Ignatius of Antioch, who's traveling westward in the early decades of the second century, comes to some of these same churches. He never mentions you people have been persecuted, but you stayed faithful. He's just worried about internal dynamics of leadership. And are they obeying the bishop? There's nothing in here about these churches being persecuted. And in the same way, when Pliny the Younger first runs into Christians and writes home to Trajan about them, this is in the early part again of the 2nd century, he's sort of asking Trajan, who these Christians be? What do I do with them? This is one of the most educated, politically in characters. It's like he's never run into them before. So it just isn't true that Diocletian, or the Flavians in general, of course they burned down the Jewish temple to the ground.
Right.
But in terms of persecuting Christians, no. They just didn't do it. So that leaves us now with a huge vacuum today in scholarship. Why then does John of Patmos, if I want to be blunt, tell a lie? He must know that Romans have not been slaughtering Christians. He must know that heaven is not filled with martyrs. So why on earth would he make Rome so brutally cruel, so pornographically evil, the whore of Babylon, and so imminently doomed? Which we know is wrong too, by the way.
Right.
God didn't destroy it.
Exactly.
Whether God would or not is a separate issue, but God didn't. So that leaves me with what I had to answer in the book. I had to answer, why does he say that? And then why does Nero come in? But why does he say it? My answer again is this. He wants to make Rome so diabolically evil, so brutally cruel, as I said, so pornographically evil, that nobody in their right mind would want to have anything to do with it. Don't even trade with it. If your neighbor is a pagan and he's a Roman citizen, don't even deal with him. Don't touch him. It's like touching tar. It's like touching evil. So he makes it as unbelievably bad as you could imagine, because he doesn't want you to even think of it. And it's imminently doomed. So why would you have anything to do with it? Get out of it, he says, my people. Get out of it. Well, you can't quite do that. You're living in it, but you can have nothing to do with it. That's the point of view of Rome. Now, that leaves him with a second question, though. We're in the Pax Romana. He's trying to tell them and ask them to visualize. The whole point of this book is to visualize it with stunning images that batter you. An image of Rome being destroyed. Now, this is the beginning of the 2nd century. The Roman century, you might call it, maybe. How can he give you a visualization? Now, it would have been easy if we're dealing it, 200 years before in the middle of the Roman civil wars. You could easily imagine Christ coming instead of a Roman general, or Alexander, when Alexander went through the Middle East and greased the whole country and destroyed Tyre and destroyed Gaza and burned it to the ground. Oh yeah, that would be a good model. So now, there's one way he can do it. There's this guy Nero. Now he's dead 30 years. But the weird thing about Nero is we think of him, he's the villain. He's the one who blamed Christians for the fire of Rome to exculpate himself. That's in the West. That's in Rome. He committed suicide to avoid having himself assassinated. But in the East, in Greece, which he had liberated, Nero was a hero. He was the great Nero. And they believed, and the legend said, he didn't really die. Because after all, he committed suicide outside Rome. Where's he buried? Where's his grave? Where's his tomb? He's not really dead. He's gone east beyond the Euphrates. And he's coming back at the head of the Parthians to destroy Rome. The Jews clap and say, marvelous. The 5th Jewish Sibylline oracle, lovely. Nero redivivus. Nero back to life to destroy Rome. And that's the model. I could never forgive for this. That's the model that John of Patmos uses for the coming Christ. He is coming to destroy the Roman Empire like you believe, mistakenly, that Nero is going to do.
So the Romans believed, to be point blank, in the Sibylline oracles, or is the Sibylline oracles the Jews who believed? So
the Sibylline oracles are the Jewish. Now, a lot of them were taken over by Christians, but basically the Sibylline oracles are Jewish. But we know from Tacitus, and I'm not certain of Suetonius as well, but lots of Roman authors said there were figures, real people, who let on they were Nero. So it's not just there was a free-floating legend.
It was so serious that people were impersonating Nero.
They were impersonating Nero, claiming to be Nero redivivus, back to life again. Not even back to life. Redivivus isn't a good Latin term. It's Nero returning, really, because he never really died. So it's kind of...
It's like Elvis or Tupac or something.
Well, at the back of their mind, it's like Jesus. He kind of died and was buried, but he didn't really, because he's coming.
Right, okay.
So Nero is the great model of the avenging returner. And that's why Nero is so important. It gives the model that people who have no experience of somebody coming and battering down your gates and, well, Nero might do it. So that's the model that he uses. That's why Nero is so important. And to understand Nero, you have to read like the 5th Sibylline oracle, written about the same time as John of Patmos, where the Jewish author there is rejoicing, of course, that Nero is coming back. Not because he likes Nero, but he certainly likes...
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Well, Nero burned Rome, is according to the Rome. Well, good for him. After all, if Nero burned Rome, the Jews who know what Vespasian and Titus did to their city are not going to mourn for Rome. And if he's coming back to destroy the Roman Empire, good for him. Maybe an Eastern Roman Empire would be better than the Western one. Mm. So Nero is the returning hero model for the returning Jesus. And that's the mystery that requires intelligence, according to John of Patmos. And that gives him his model. Otherwise, what visual model does he have in the Pax Romana, which has been going on since, let's say, in round numbers, 30 BCE, 100 and maybe 40 years? Nobody alive has ever seen a Roman city burned to the ground, its gates battered down. So a returning Nero, that's the model for the returning Jesus.
And so the mark of the beast and the idea of not being able to buy or sell, are these imaginative? Does he literally mean there's a mark that will be on your hand or forehead? Was there something that was going on? Or is that symbolism that is used in the Hebrew thought of like the law will be on my hand and my forehead, like you're going against the Torah?
Yeah. To take that literally, the mark of the beast, I mean, it has a literal meaning. It mean, you see, buying and selling, it means, are you trading with Rome? Are you entering into this Mediterranean globalization? Now, they're not going to stamp your thing like you're going into a nightclub or something.
Right.
But the mark of the beast is that you're trading. That's where it's buying and selling. You want to, what's wrong with buying and selling? Well, there's nothing wrong with buying and selling. And Paul, who would have said, of course you can do that. But that gets you into the Roman system. And I think for John, it's not so much that the buying and selling, the trading with Rome is the nose of the camel in the tent. He would say, no, globalization is imperialism. It's not a different thing. Rome doesn't accumulate the Mediterranean just because it likes to collect land. And so we can get nice maps with red all around the sea because Rome has a nice circle around the sea. Roman imperialism, I would say any imperialism. In one sense, this is John's correct intuition. Imperialism is about globalization. It's about business. Now, if it's about crude business, like maybe the Assyrians are going to come and take your stuff, you got a problem with that? But for Rome, it's about business. Inside the Pax Romana, business is booming, at least as far as an ancient business could boom. So why would not these rich cities want to be involved in it? Of course. They're all the rich cities, close to the to the Aegean Sea. They're right there. If they can deal with this, they go into the whole Mediterranean globalization. So again, to repeat, John of Patmos is after any business with Rome. Don't touch it. And again, it's doomed. One other reason. First of all, as we've seen, it's diabolical, which is one reason. It's evil, cruel. It's pornographic. I mean, that terrible image of Rome as to put it bluntly, the whorehouse of the Mediterranean. Of course, everyone's going to Rome, he says. It's the power of attraction. John is far more warning against the power of attraction than the power of aggression.
Is it fair to say he's thinking, let's be holy, separate?
Oh, yes. Wholly separate is exactly what he's talking about. Wholly separate, living in the Roman Empire, but not of the Roman Empire. Think of aggression. You think of the legions. That's all done. The whole Mediterranean is now pretty much Roman. If you're living in those great cities in what we call Western Turkey today, you're deeply involved in the Roman Empire and happy with it. If you're an aristocrat or a business person in those cities, you love it. It's good for business. You don't have to worry about armies. You don't have to pay to keep your own military. Rome takes care of all that stuff. But Rome is on the frontiers. Inside the frontiers, everything is peaceful. Business is booming. Now, along comes John of Patmos. No wonder they exiled him. Because he was probably saying, don't have anything to do with Roman business. It's an attraction. It's not an aggression. You would know how to fight the legions if they came in, but it's an attraction. It seduces you. That's why he uses the pornographic imagery. It seduces you. It entices you. Nobody forces you to go to a brothel. So by calling Rome the great brothel of the Mediterranean, it attracts you. Beware of attraction. Aggression you'll recognize and you'll fight against, but attraction will get you. So the logic of his images, and he batters you with these images. You don't have time to think. 7 bowls, 7 this, 7 that, and they're all coming at me. It's like a strobe light whirling. I don't have time to think. I can't think. That's what he's doing to you. But at the end, you're getting a message. Diabolical, cruel, pornographic, doomed. I don't want anything to do with it. If it worked. And quite frankly, all the evidence is it didn't. It didn't.
Ladies and gentlemen, join MythVision's Patreon not only to support us, but there are 72 videos that I did with Dr. Dennis R. McDonald and Richard Carrier, all on the Patreon, early access. You guys can ask personal questions when I go to interview these scholars, and you're helping MythVision grow.